Very good morning to you and welcome to K24 this morning. My name is Mungala Mbuvi, sitting in for Jeff Mote. Let's take a look at the headlines on our newspaper this morning as we go forward. Remember, you can dial *550*4# to get your copy of the People Daily. And just to let you know what you'll be looking at today, here it goes. It says it's a two-year crash course, or rather two-year crash schools calendar. That is what the CS for Education yesterday, Professor Magoha, did say in his presser, flanked by members of his ministry as well. The timetable, it will be a marathon for learners who are expected to cover 3 years of schooling in 24 months when the rest of classes resume on January 4th, 2021. Get the full story on page 4. Now, he says that everything that has been missed literally will be squeezed into 24 months so that the students can catch up. No need to worry, of course, for the students because at least the time loss will be recovered. Still on the People Daily, at the very top there we see the horror of children's theft syndicate. That's on page 12 of your People Daily. Babies are going for as little as 30,000 Kenya shillings in Nairobi County. And also COVID-19 cover for medics as second vaccine gets critical nod. That story is on page 5, and it says, the government will provide insurance for healthcare workers as Moderna, a U.S. company, says its vaccine has a 94.5% efficacy. The second in 2 weeks. And also a small story there on page 8. Which way for Kenya-US free trade deal? Well, grab your copy. Like I said, all you need to do is dial *550*4#, and for only 10 shillings, you will get this copy of the People Daily. You don't need any data. You do not need any application for you to get this one. So do dial that number, *550*4# for only 10 shillings. All right, moving on to the next one, the Daily Nation. The front page says, the race to save the lost year. Again, that is what is currently trending on those two papers, making headlines. The race to save the lost year. Indeed, since March, students have been out of school. Some, of course, a few weeks ago went back. But what does it mean for the rest that never attended school? Then that is a story that is on page 7. And it says that the schedule in the complicated arithmetic of saving Kenya's education sector from the ravages of coronavirus, primary and secondary school learners face 2 years of a brutal yet important crash program. Again, it will be compressed into 24 months for the 2 years that they will need to recover the lost time. Also, still on the Daily Nation, Tuju, we want Uhuru at the helm of Jubilee after 2022. It goes on to say on page 4 and 5 that in an exclusive interview, Jubilee Party Secretary General reveals why the leadership of the ruling party might not change anytime soon, but not everyone is clapping on. Definitely a story of great interest that we shall need to discuss right on the show. And also on page 10, investigation at Kakuzi, guards run sex for firewood kiosk. Quite embarrassing if you ask me. In community accounts that will send chills down your spine, local accused multinational firm of human rights violation. And at the very top there, we see that Fatuma Zarika, why I had to quit boxing. That story is on page 39. And on page 12, Olympic champion charged with defilement. If you've been following the story of Kipruto Conseslus, he was actually arrested last week on November 11th. And now, yesterday, he was released on a cash bail of about 200,000 shillings. That is also on the Daily Nation. You can check that story on page 12. Moving on to the Standard newspaper. Front page again, still on the school's reopening story. What new school calendar means on page 6 and 7. That's where you get the full story. And it goes on to say that the candidates to sit final exams in March, a new academic year to start in July when the PP1 do report to school. Parents face back-to-back fees deadlines as the ministry pushes to make up for lost time. Indeed, something has to be done. As you can see on the very left side of the page, it says that the fresh hope for world in COVID fight. A second vaccine is in the offing after U.S. drug maker Moderna announced that its trials for protection against coronavirus showed 95% efficacy. Of course, the numbers differing there from 94.5 in different sources. Very top there, page 4 says that Ruto hosts MCAs in new wave of BBI talks. Deputy President meets ward representatives at his current home a week after cancelling rallies due to COVID-19 surge. Definitely something to look at on page 4. And lastly, on the same page, inside Nairobi's baby buying ring. A BBC investigation reveals that babies are being stolen and sold for as little as 45,000 bob by a cartel targeting vulnerable mothers. Of course, other sources are saying for as little as 30,000 shillings. Lastly, on the Star newspaper, the front page, BBI, inside plan to give counties more roles, taking a different turn there, but still talking about the schools reopening, how schools will recover lost time, according to CS Magoha. That is the trending story, the front page there, the headlining story. As you can see, children there accessing water. COVID, or rather convict to serve 30 years after winning appeal. That story is on page 3. And also BBI critics issue ultimatum and vow to shoot down report. That story is on page 8 of the Star newspaper. And at the very top there on page 2, governors to take charge of COVID-19 control measures, says the Cabinet Secretary for Health, that is Mutahi Kagwe. Full story on page 2. All right, thank you very much for joining us this far. Allow me to introduce my guest in a couple of minutes, but this is where the K24 This Morning newspaper review starts. All right, allow me to, once again, I welcome you to the show. This is K24 This Morning. My name is Mungala Mbuvi, sitting in for Jeff Mote. However, we do have a great panel of guests that are going to help us go through the discussion for today. We do have Vivian Tar, governance analyst. Welcome very much to the show.
Thank you.
We also have Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst. Karibu tena sana.
Thank you very much.
All right, and on the very far left, we have Justus Minor, governance expert. Welcome to the show, Justus.
Thank you very much.
All right, before I let us have our discussion, now let's first of all look at a story that ran yesterday as the CES was announcing the reopening of schools that is going to be happening on the 4th of March for every other student who's been at home. Let's take a look.
All schools will reopen fully on the 4th of January 2021. This will apply to PP1 and 2, Grade 1, 2, and 3, Class 5, 6, and 7, and Form 1, 2, and 3 learners.
Following a directive by President Uhuru Kenyatta to find a solution to the new education calendar, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha, in a meeting with stakeholders, noted that Grade 4 CBC learners who reported back to school in October would go for a holiday as the other students finish their third term.
Grade 4 and incoming Form 1 Class 8 graduates learners will stay at home as other learners complete their third term. Grade 4 CBC learners will transition to Grade 5 in July 2021.
Other learners will also be required to go for a 7-week holiday after the end of the second term on March 19th to allow for administration and marking of the KCSE and KCPE exams.
International schools will reopen from the 4th of January 2021 for all their learners still at home. All 4-year-olds will join PP1 in July 2021.
Professor Magoha also appealed to benefactors to aid in the supply of masks for students, noting that they were among the most crucial items in ensuring the calendar runs smoothly.
To prepare the schools for reopening, the most important constant is going to be the mask. We already have some masks in stock to cater for some poor, but we don't mind getting any extra.
On its part, the Teachers Service Commission, through CEO Nancy Masharia, revealed that the body had talks with the teachers' medical provider to ensure teachers received necessary covers against COVID-19.
I want to assure our teachers that the employer is in no business of dismissing teachers, and especially when this has been a presidential directive. We just want you to take care of your health, because as an employer, we want to have you long.
People who have been away from home all this time have suffered undue stress, anxiety, depression, drug substance abuse. We have had increased cases of teenage pregnancy, child mortality, malnutrition, especially in places where we had school feeding program, and therefore with that children will not be able to achieve their full potential. And also studies done by the World Bank and IMF indicate that for every year a child is out of school, you lose the equivalent of $4,500.
With the official confirmation that schools will resume come January 2021, it is now up to parents, pupils and teachers to put all the measures in place before pupils go back to school and ensure their safety. Robbie Omondi, K24.
All right, and there you have it. Schools are reopening fully in 4th of January, including international schools, and the PP1s rather will be going back to school in July. Vivian, let me just start off with you. The CS has addressed some of the issues that a lot of parents have been asking. Masks will be provided. The TSC has said that there will be cover for teachers in case, any of them falls ill due to COVID-19 and so on. The DG, Dr. Amoth, has said that the reason why, they want to make sure that kids are back in school is because malnutrition, drug and substance abuse has become a menace. Do you feel like this has addressed some of the, what parents have been feeling as though that, it hasn't been addressed for them to take back their kids back to school?
It certainly has. Although there's still room for improvement in terms of the infrastructure available in the schools, especially public schools, when it comes to seating, pupil seating, in terms of now social distancing, in terms of availability of not just masks, but even clean running water, soap, just for hygiene purposes. So there's been an improvement, definitely. It's a little bit welcome. But there's still a lot of room for improvement. Public schools may not all be able to, cater to everything. But of course, we welcome the move to have children go back to school for the reasons you mentioned, but also because the right to education for every child, is enshrined in the Constitution. So, and the way things seem to be going right now, we need to find a way to coexist with COVID-19. And if the students have lost nearly a whole year of school, it's about time we found a way of, despite the surging numbers, of getting back to some sense of normalcy. Right. Yes.
Okay. Arnold, I'll just jump over to you because she has mentioned something very important in terms of infrastructure. We need social distancing in classes and also in some of the activities that the students will be doing, such as PE and so on and so forth. But if we just go back to even something as simple as transporting kids from home to school and school to home, especially for the day scholars, social distancing is needed in their school buses. Do you think this has been addressed? Because there's a school that has one school bus, and it's because they knew they had 20 kids. So they have only 20 seats in that school bus. Now, probably they are forced to either have 2 trips every morning and every evening, or add an extra school bus so they can make sure that the kids are social distance. Is this practical at all?
First of all, I just need to say that I am actually very skeptical about, or with the dates that have been given, because I know the numbers have gone high. For the first time, we actually are seeing it literally. You no longer can actually say that we're going to trace easily. Yesterday, for the first time, we had a school child dying in Mumias. Right. Of course, just in the neighboring constituency, there was an MP who died the other day. Yeah. So the numbers have gone much, much higher. And I'm actually very skeptical that probably the declaration made yesterday could just be that, a declaration and nothing more to it, unless the numbers then are reined in, even before we talk about the preparations, because strictly speaking, the guidelines as put out by the Ministry of Health cannot be met by schools with existing infrastructure, as it were. Because if you are to speak about social distancing, starting with the schools themselves, if we talk about the almost 30,000 public schools we have, you will realize that normally children are cramped up in those classes. For the past about 6 to 7 months that we've been in lockdowns and with this particular situation, there has not been any creation and construction of new classes. It's not even possible. So that's why I'm actually thinking, if we talk about preparation per se, in the language of the Ministry of Health, it's difficult to meet that. You talk about transporting. Even as we speak, adults who have got sense, who understand things, still are sitting in matatus that are actually cramped up. Yet there are guidelines on how matatus should be. They still increased the prices. But they are now just, people are actually sitting just the way they used to. So literally, I also do not expect that schools then will be expected to do differently unless the cost gets higher. Okay. And we are looking at the social effects already, and then the economic effects. So if it's going to be much higher, I do not think so many parents will actually be in a position to cater for that. Okay. But something else, or something more, is that there's going to be an influx of children going to public schools. Those who are in private schools that have closed, in places where parents can no longer meet it. The other place they actually, the only alternative they have will be to take their children to public schools. Okay. And we already say, we already know that public schools are already
cramped up as well.
Cramped up already. So I'm skeptical about the dates, but I also know about, if we talk about the preparations, it's not in the strict language of the Ministry of Health. Okay. It's not something we are able to meet. But the one thing I know we can easily do will be to be able to actually provide running water and to have them masked up. Even though children are quite difficult people, you might not be in a position. Even if you look at the estates where we live, children live with masks, and while they are out there, they remember they are supposed to shout, so they remove them and then they start playing. It's one big mess, and I don't think we are prepared.
Justice Minor, if you're looking at this situation, just how practical is it for us to have schools reopen on 4th of January moving forward? And this, we're talking now for every other person who's at home.
I take the preparation, or the so-called preparation by the Ministry of Education, with a pinch of salt, because I do not think that it is proper that reopening of schools should merely be dictated by calendars. Okay. I think it should be dictated by the prevailing circumstance on the ground. And honestly, this is a third world country. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the resources. And remember, we closed school when the number was below 10. Now we've got numbers that are up to 1,000 in a day. And remember, we have been hearing stories of schools like Cabernet and a number of schools that have had infection as high as 50% of the school, the students in those schools. So I believe that if we were to be carried away by merely the calendar and the instructions from the president, I think we will get this wrong. And remember, the COVID-19 needs the movement of people, needs the movement of these kids. Once people are moving, COVID-19 is rolling down. And therefore, I think the mere fact that we are responding to the primordial urge of the calendar of a school, and at the end of the year, now we are talking about January, and therefore that we are going to be carried away by mere numbers of that, the fact that we have had our children out of school for the last 1 year. We would rather have people at home than the rest of us dying, because these are children may not be affected majorly, but remember, these are children who go to school and come back, and if they were to be carriers, remember, these children will come back to their grandmothers, to their parents, to their aunts and uncles and guardians. So going January again, I think we must be prepared for a wave that a wave that we may not be able to handle as a country. And remember, we have had the stories of the NHIF, and almost 80% of Kenyans depend on NHIF. Yes. If we were to have the spike going up again as a result of the reopening of schools, and NHIF is actually taking a walking away from the patients and saying that we don't have the capacity to pay for the medical bills. So there's contradiction. The fact that NHIF is not prepared to pay for the bills of the patient in hospitals, and the fact that we are planning to open schools in January, that is a contradiction we need to address, and that we need to address as soon as we can.
All right. Thank you very much, Justice, for that. Of course, Vivian has said she's applauding the situation in a sense. Arnold says that he's not confident at all. Justice says, let's just shut it down and wait for things to calm down. Of course, this is a discussion we shall definitely continue having, but right now, I want us to have a different conversation, and this one touches on the BBI. Now, room for more talks on the Building Bridges Initiative, BBI, is quickly diminishing as the collection of 1 million signatures to kick off the BBI train is set for this week. Now, this comes as Deputy President William Ruto and other leaders call for a national conversation to avoid splitting the country into pro and anti-BBI factions. Now, Give Us in Minor now reports that the next step will be for the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, to verify the signatures once the process is complete.
The collection of 1 million signatures to amend the constitution through the Building Bridges Initiative BBI report is set for Thursday this week. This follows an announcement by the former premier and ODM leader Raila Odinga that he expects the exercise to be conducted within 30 days, spelling doom for those who were opposing the changes, warning that the BBI train had already left. With the roadmap to referendum now clear, the next step will be for the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission IEBC to verify the signatures once the process is complete. This goes on even as various leaders call for a national conversation to build consensus on the matter. Deputy President William Ruto on Monday said the country was headed to a lose-lose outcome from the BBI unless the hardline position taken by some of those steering the process is relaxed.
The document we have, which has taken us 2 years, has so many gaps and is so controversial that unless you accommodate the views of the various stakeholders, we will end up with a lose-lose outcome.
The DP, who spoke in a meeting with members of the County Assembly of Wajir, noted that by the look of things, it was clear that some quarters were pushing for a divisive yes-no referendum for political reasons that targeted the 2022 polls.
If you are trying to treat divisive elections and a divided country, and then you are running a divisive referendum that will end up with a divided country, what are you achieving? And what is the whole of this hurry for? And are we really genuine? Are we serious? Do we really mean well for the country?
With the coronavirus infections skyrocketing in every single day and taking away lives, the DP highlighted that it was time the country's leadership was united to fight the disease and shun politics.
There are so many people who cannot afford to go to hospital, and yet we are focused in politics instead of being focused on the health crisis that faces our country.
However, various groups across the country welcome the BBI, saying the initiative will generate livelihoods to women and youth in the country.
Maana serikali ni kufacilitate zile vitu zinaitwa kwa kimombo city hall meetings ama city hall gatherings, ndio tuweze kuelimisha watu wetu.
Hiyo pesa wakati kukuwa na ugawi fulani ambao unaenda kwa wamama wakulima, ndio pia sisi kama vijana pia tuweze ku benefit from it.
The room to amend the BBI report is now on the brink as time quickly lapses before the signature collection kicks off on Thursday this week. Giverson Minor, K24.
All right, indeed, a lot has been said by the Deputy President. So many gaps. He has mentioned political reasons. He has talked about division, asking whether the ones pushing for the BBI are actually serious. And that brings us to the question of the day. Kindly let us know your thoughts on this one. Is it possible to have a non-contested referendum? That is what we're asking you today. Is it possible to have a non-contested referendum so that everything can just be smooth and we can have an easy time indeed going forward? And this is where I will ask our panelists, starting with you, Arnold. The Deputy President, in that particular video we've seen, he's spoken about divisions and he has said there's so many gaps, but the one that he has really touched on, and I think everyone is thinking about right now, is the health situation in the country. So much money will be spent on the BBI reggae, so much money will be spent on the referendum, and yet we are talking about just providing masks and sanitizers and water and soap just for students to get back to school. Is this even where we should be focusing as far as BBI is concerned and health?
I have actually seen the discussions in groups and in other social places have been when people try to actually raise the argument you're actually putting forth, that we have got a pandemic, we have got an emergency, and we do not have money to even address that, but we do have money for elections. I have seen the proponents actually pushing for BBI argue that what is the correlation between the two, and that sometimes correlation is not causation. You can still correlate the two, but it's not necessarily that. But I actually want to say this, that realistically speaking, is that it's almost impossible. It's actually impossible to have a non-contested referendum. it's almost impossible. I know that if you're going to have an election once in a while, there are people who are elected, like Kimani Ichung'wah, of course, coming off. But that is a very rare one. Out of the 290 constituencies we had, only one. We never had such like a case, I think, in 2013. So it's normally not an everyday occurrence. But on a referenda like what we're going to have, it's impossible to have a non-contested. Of course, we can bring down the issues of contestations to the bare minimum. So that said, I do not even want to relate BBI, the argument around BBI and then the COVID-19 issues as well, because the guys on the other side pushing for this have decided that it will have to go through. And these guys have got the means, they have got they have decided they have the means and they have got even the resources to do it. So whether you protest or not, it looks like reggae will actually have to play. And therefore, and that is why for me, I think for those who are trying to call for a voice of reason, you realize that on the other side, reason and logic
don't go hand in hand.
Are not going hand in hand. They're already asking you what is the correlation between the increased numbers of COVID infections and BBI. To them, it has to continue. And that's why I'm actually coming to a place that I think that all of us should give BBI a chance. That referendum should be given a chance. And I want to give a narrative of a guy called Edward Lutwak.
Can we give that narrative after the break, please?
Okay,
so let's take a short break as we give you time to respond to what we asked you earlier on. Is it possible to have an uncontested BBI? Well, let's see how that goes in a short while. We'll be right back. Do not go too far.